All right, well, welcome everybody to our second in a Fall Brown Bag series. I'm really happy today to welcome Dr. Charles Mathies, who goes by Charlie, and he's generously brought us some delicious Finnish hazelnut chocolate to pass around. But
is it the top of the class?
it is.
First in the world.
That's right.
I like it, so
It is.
that's just my biased opinion.
OISE.
So, but we're pleased to have everybody join us. We're also recording this, so those who weren't able to come today will have it posted on our website before too long. Dr. Mathies is here for a month and was invited by the Department of Educational Administration, specifically Dr. Brendan Cantwell, who's currently on sabbatical. So he's occupying Brendan's office for the month, and today is going to be talking to us about conducting an international job search and sharing some of his own journey from U.S. academia to Europe. And he's also going to share a bit about some of the funding opportunities there as well, and some of the opportunities both for graduate students and faculty. But I wanted to make sure and mention that you have another talk coming up hosted by Educational Administration on November 8th. Yeah, and that will be on your research.
Yeah.
And then you're also willing to do individual consultations with faculty and our students who might be interested in further study or research in Europe, Erasmus Mundus and the European Research Council, and funding that's more for Europeans, but there are ways for non-Europeans to get involved in that. So he's generously offering to do a lot of things for us while he's here. So please welcome Dr. Mathies. We'll turn it over to you.
Can I just say something before you start?
Sure.
Of course.
So myself, I teach here, I'm a faculty member here, but I'm not an American. I'm Canadian. So as you talk about whatever opportunities there are, if you can sort of keep that in mind,
Yeah.
what applies only to U.S. citizens.
Right.
What,
Yeah.
Many nationalities here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about that before he came, so.
Yeah. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about, my context is Europe, but I think it's applicable in a lot of ways to a lot of different areas, geographically, whether it's Europe, particularly Australia, and some opportunities in South America that I'm aware of. But most of how I couch this and frame this is going to be very much a European lens.
Yeah, no.
Content-wise, but I think a lot of the specifics of ideas to think about are applicable.
my question, I think, was different. My point was different.
Yeah, it's coming
sometimes
from...
when I read all these announcements that come so generously from Lynn,
Yes.
it is you have to
If
be
you're
an
a US
American citizen in order to.
Yeah.
So Europe has different agreements
Yep.
with different countries. So that's what I wanted.
Yeah. And I don't have much here about the funding opportunities.
But I know you're willing to meet separately on those.
I can talk
yeah.
about those pretty easily if people have desires here or elsewhere. So. But just briefly here, these are just some of the things I was asked to talk a little bit about my journey and my experiences. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but I'm going to talk about the good or the exotic things about living abroad and working abroad, and also some of the challenges and the costs of living abroad. I'm going to talk about developing yourself. Particularly, this is for the students mainly. I want to talk about the need of networks, visas. This is a key thing. And then actual searching for the job and some tips that I have and comments on that. And then lastly, and this will take hopefully most of the time, is question and answer. I think I've done this talk before, and I think this is where actually a lot of the ideas and conversation in the question and answers has been probably the most helpful. So I live in Finland. So some may frame this as, is this snowmageddon or a snowstorm? No, this is just an average Wednesday in March. So I took this March 14th, which if you think about it here is the start of March Madness. So we get about 4 or 5 months of snow, and once the snow comes, late December, it usually stays on the ground until end of March into April. So not too bad. So this is my commute to work in the summer. So I live on a lake, and then that's the university at the far end there, and then I live on this end of the lake. But I was born and raised in Ohio. I was born in Toledo and grew up in Dayton. And my undergrad was at Toledo. I did my master's at the University of South Carolina in Student Affairs. And then I did my PhD at the University of Georgia in higher education, and specifically with higher ed policy. And I worked in student affairs and university administration for about 15 years before going abroad. And I went abroad in 2011. So this is the building I work in. This is our College of Education. I am located in the Finnish Institute for Educational Research. It's a separate entity than the Faculty of Education. But we're all both located in this building.
And how do you pronounce the university name?
Jyväskylä.
Okay,
So it starts with the JYV, and then it's pronounce it like a Y-O-U. U. When I originally came, I was going to come for 9 months. My wife got a Fulbright. She's also American, and I came along, and that turned into a permanent contract, a 10-year position, and now I've been there for 8 years. So my first job was I developed an IR office, institutional research office, from scratch, working in administration, and then I switched over, and I have now a research fellowship from the Academy of Finland to conduct my research. So that's enough about me. I'm happy to talk more about me, but I think this is talking about the actual moving abroad, living abroad, and thinking about the job search. So this is a sign outside the airport in Helsinki. So when you land in November, this is what you see.
What do they say in December? Is there a different sign?
Well, to me, November is the most difficult month. And in Finnish, it's called Marrasku, and the direct translation is Death Month. It is. This should probably go on to the next slide about the Death Month, the challenges. But they call it that because you lose about 5 to 6 minutes of daylight a day. We are very far north. We're about the same parallel as Alaska. And it's about 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And it stays that pretty much the whole month, and plus or minus 1 or 2 degrees. It's gray even on daylight, and it's rainy. So it's a cold, rain. It fits. So this is a marketing campaign though, but it fits. But it's exotic. I mean, people come and oh, this is amazing, this is cool, and I'm like, this is my 8th year of this. So, but the good, particularly in Europe, but also more specifically in Finland, the work-life balance, it's very nice. My work week is expected to be 36 hours a week. I am expected to have life outside of work. The head of my institute talks to me consistently about this. So like when I have performance evaluations and things like this is one of the things that comes up. Is what are you doing for your hobbies? And I never had that in my work life here in the U.S. But it's very true. I get up almost every morning, walk my daughter to her daycare, her school, and then I go to work, then I go pick her back up after work, and I walk home with her. It's a very nice work-life balance. When you are away, you don't check your email. That is part of the culture. So it's a nice thing there. It is a new lifestyle. I do not own a car. A lot of people do not own cars. We walk, we bike, even in the snow. I have snow tires on my bike, with metal spikes. So it's a new work-life balance, lifestyle. It is challenging at times, though, because you have to figure out, what this is for you and what that means. I think this is a good thing, but there's a social welfare state there. And you also see this in various parts of Europe, even though Finland has, on the spectrum, it's probably very far left. But even in other parts of Europe, you have much more of social services, everything from healthcare to other things that are provided by the governments.
Death school.
Yes. So it's a different mentality. When I talk to my colleagues about, say, retirement, it's completely, it's an unheard of conversation. Why are you saving money for retirement? You have your pension that's supported by the government. And so it's a different, mentality there. To me, this is a very nice, it's a good thing. It's different. Traveling, I travel a lot in the EU, and it's very easy to get around going country to country within the Schengen region. I have conferences. This past year I had a conference in Barcelona, Budapest, and Leipzig in Sweden. And my last year when I was in Georgia, I had conferences in Kennesaw, Georgia, which is 30 minutes north of Atlanta, and Pittsburgh, which I grew up in Ohio, so Pittsburgh wasn't that exotic to me. So it's nice that you see different parts of the world, different things like this. There's a lot of cultural experiences. I have learned a lot about my own self, but also experienced a lot of different things. I've surprised myself in a lot of ways. From foods I've tasted to going into the sauna, going ice hole swimming, frozen lake swimming. They cut a hole in the lake and you go swimming in the frozen lake. Yeah, I didn't think I would ever do that. So there's a lot of cultural experiences that you expose yourself to when you go abroad. Different foods, things like that. I do want to talk about the challenges and the cost. I'll be real with you. There are costs to this. It is a different work lifestyle, work culture. I've been there 8 years, and still have conflicts at times, more internally, of expectations I have of my colleagues or how things should work. I work at night. I answer emails. I do this, but that's my own self, and I have to remember my colleagues this is part of the culture that doesn't. They do not do this. So there's a conflict there. So it's understanding that. Ambiguity. Going abroad, there's a lot of times you're going to be sitting in places, I would call it a gray zone. You don't know who to ask or what to ask per se, and you just kind of have to sit with it sometimes and figure out how to move through these gray zones, these gray areas. I'll give you an example. When I first got there, they were like, okay, go over to this building to get your key. I didn't know A, where that building was, and B, who to talk to and how to ask for the key. And this was also in a whole other language. So I've had to learn Finnish. It's not an easy language. So when you go abroad, you are taking on another language. I was, in some ways, a guinea pig for our university, and they rewrote our entire staffing manual, and I helped them to translate it into English because we didn't have that before. So, but mastering the language of that host country is very key. Friends and family, you are away from them. And there are things that you will miss. I've missed a lot of family reunions. My grandmother passed away about 18 months ago, and all my cousins and my brother were able to go, came in to see her, and I wasn't able to be there. And that's a miss, that's a cost when you go abroad, and it's real. Career advancement. And I'm being very serious about this. When you go abroad, how do you translate that back into your home country or the third country, those experiences? My first job title in Finland, the direct English translation was expert. How do I translate that into, say, a U.S. academic experience? But it's thinking about things like this in some ways, that your career, it doesn't necessarily match up one-to-one. So you have to spend a lot of time thinking about, is this actually good for my career to be abroad and to do this? And then life as a migrant. I've faced discrimination, not as much as some of my fellow, my friends and colleagues, mainly because of my skin color and the way I look. I have a lot of Scandinavian roots in my family. So until I open my mouth and start speaking Finnish, they think I'm Finnish. Most people think I'm Finnish. Whereas my friends who are of color, they faced a lot of racism and things like this. The country as a whole is not, but there are situations that come up, discrimination. And it's real, and you have to understand that you're going to experience this in some ways. And there's no getting around it.
So how is all this different than the US?
It's not. It's not. Some people, but I think I've come across a lot of people who are looking to go abroad, and they don't think of this. This doesn't even enter the purview until they're actually confronted with this, and they're surprised. And so what I'm saying is, think about these things before you go. You need to understand that these experiences will happen to you. All right. Again, I'm very informal with this, so if there's questions or comments, please ask. But I want to get into more about some specifics. So this one here I entitled Developing Yourself. And there's some general things and then some more specific. So first off, I would expand your reading. There's a lot of stuff written about internationalizing the curriculum, the syllabus. You have Riyadh upstairs on the fourth floor. He's written a really great piece about nationalistic methodology. This is real. Particularly in the US, I had to unlearn a lot of perspectives when I went abroad. You can help yourself before you go by reading different journals, reading different authors. Expand your horizons there. Incorporate that in your writing. And you can do this a number of different ways, but look at international topics. Whether this is within your coursework, talk with your faculty members, but expand your writing, target your journals. This will make you marketable to those international offices, or to those international opportunities. Go to internationally focused conference. There are a number of these here in the US. CEIES comes to mind, first off in my discipline, which is international higher ed. But I go to ASH, and even within ASH, as a conference, national conference, there are international tracks within that bring in international scholars and things like this. These are good ways to connect with those type of people. And then you don't have to go abroad to do so. More specifically, work with your faculty members, particularly your advisors, on your development, whether it's theoretical development, your research methods, your writing skills, things like this. And think about what you need to target or what you need to develop to move into this area. And then when I talked about this earlier, is think about your coursework. So your course assignments that you're given. Figure out ways that you can internationalize your assignment. It's in some ways you cannot, and sometimes you're not able to, but often there are ways to do so. And I would encourage to do that. Networks. To me, networks are probably the biggest make or break to go abroad. And I frame this both pre-arrival and post-arrival. But to go abroad, establishing your network and developing it is very, very key. And they can help you identify opportunities. A lot of the opportunities, particularly in Europe, are not well publicized outside of Europe. And they're on either listservs that are very European-centric or on national websites and things like this. So it's no different than here in the U.S., if you will, if you think of U.S. as a system in itself. So, but if you have networks of people who are tapped into these, they can pass these on, they can point these out when they come available. And they can also make introductions to other people, expand your network, and assist in developing your transferable skills and knowledge. And then I would also say internationalize your conferencing, whether here in the US or going abroad. Post-arrival, your networks, they can help you in the transition, and this is both professionally, understanding the work culture, some of the challenges there, to personally, where is the grocery stores? Where can I, get a shoe repaired? Things like this. And they're also very key for growth in the new country, in that region. I could not be where I'm at today without the professor, the head of my institute, helping me along the way, spending time, talking to me about what are opportunities, how things work, and in some ways was a mentor, but was very much a key part of my network. I met him 3 years before I went abroad at a conference. And I gave a paper, and he liked it, and we started talking, and then he actually hired my wife, or hosted my wife on for Fulbright. But because I knew him and had a relationship with him, I was able to parlay that into my position. One thing that's not talked about enough, I think is very key, is maintain your old networks. So once you do go abroad, keep your old networks. Because if you don't maintain them, they will dry up. And so if you have any interest in coming back, you need to maintain those networks. So I have a series of colleagues and friends here in the U.S. who I talk to on a regular basis. And a lot of it is just so I understand what are the key issues, what are the key points in U.S. higher education. So when time comes for me to come back, I'm not completely unaware of what's going on and the changes. Visas. I never knew how much visas are important until I needed one myself. It's, in most cases, you will need one unless you, have the right to work or live in a particular country. However, most jobs require the a visa for applicants. There are ways around this, particularly with academia. Academia is a little more open. They will hire people, and more so than the general public, or more so than non-academic jobs, if you will, without the visa, and they'll work with you to get your visa. But it is a blocking point. It is something to understand and recognize. Different countries have different rules for your visas. So I would suggest focus on countries that are similar to one another, whether it's like in the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal, Spain, they have a lot of similar rules. Up in the Nordics, we have a lot of similar rules, things like this. So this will reduce the amount of homework you have to do on understanding the rules and visa regulations. The EU, the European Union, has what's called a blue card. You can apply for this before you go, and this gets you your access. The one thing I will say about this, though, is the influence of this is dwindling and is starting to go down. They enacted it a number of years ago with the idea of this being kind of like a highly skilled migrant green card, if you will. But it hasn't actually worked as well as they thought it would. But there are still avenues and possibilities there. The key in all this is you have to apply for the blue card within the country you are targeting to move to. And then within each country there are different rules and regulations for amounts of stay and things like that. So, but this is an EU-wide blue card, so once you get it, you have the right to work in any of the EU countries.
Do you have to have a position to apply for a card?
No, you do not.
And this is in addition to the visa?
This would be, this is your visa in many
Okay.
ways. but the rules and regulations are at the EU level for the most part, but then each country can add on
I see.
of how to stipulate how you actually get to it. So one of the key differences that I've seen is length of stay. So if you say you get this in Finland, you have to be there for, you're saying you're going to be there for 2 years, whereas some other countries it might only be 1 year before you can move on to a third country within the EU. So, I will say with Brexit, this is going to create some opportunities, and also going to create some more restrictions for the UK, opportunities in the UK. UK for Americans is probably one of the easiest avenues, simply because of the language and the cultural similarities. With Brexit, I have seen estimates from 1/3 to about 40% of the academic staff in the UK is EU nationals, non-UK, and they are projecting to lose somewhere between 1/3 to a half of those with Brexit. And Brexit goes into effect in March of this year, or is it May? March or May. So there will be lots of openings, lots of movement. It's already happening. There's a lot of inter-European mobility right now that's going on in academia, because and a lot of it, I think, has been driven by Brexit.
There are also English faculty working in Europe, so they might.
Yeah, they might want to go back. Yeah, so, but again, there is going to be a number of opportunities going to be coming open in the UK. However, there's going to be severe restrictions with that. So what those restrictions are, I don't know, simply because the Home Office there hasn't really come out with a whole lot on anything, because they're still in negotiations for EU Brexit, and it's. I've seen a lot of the press, and probably the best way I've seen it summed up is it's a mess. So, but this is something that I would say to you, keep an eye on in the next 6 months to a year, maybe even 18 months, that this is where you'll start seeing opportunities. And this is anything from PhDs to postdocs to what we would think of here as faculty positions. So. And this is something that, again, I bring up as opportunity. With academic openings, when you do the search, in my opinion, the best source is each country has a dedicated website to academic openings. And you have to understand what that is and where it's located. You know, in the UK, I have it written down, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there's a specific site in all the universities there, this is where they post. In the Netherlands, this is there. There are some European-wide sites that post, but the coverage, in my estimation, is somewhere about 50 to 60% of the actual openings. So if you want to work in a particular country or a particular area, region, go to the national websites. And you can find them there. Understand, though, these universities in Europe, again, this is framing this in European, they do not have student affairs. They have very limited professional administration staff. So those positions do not really exist there. What does exist is academic posts. So research, teaching, things like that. Also understand a lot of these postings will be in the native language. If it is an international hire, if they're open to it, it typically will be posted in English. But even when you go to these national websites, the posting, you know, like I was looking at Netherlands for a while. I think it was maybe 50-60% of those were in Dutch. So,
How many universities in Europe teach in English?
Well, how would you define teaching English? Because most universities in Europe will have international programs. if English is not the native language. They have international programs. Those are taught in English. They also have a series of programs for Erasmus Mundus, or for the Erasmus Plus scheme. So Erasmus is a scheme where students can go study abroad in Europe, in another European country. And those courses are typically taught in English. There are some exceptions of this, particularly in Germany and France, in German and French language. But most schools, most universities will have English programs, taught programs, whether it's at the master's level or for this Erasmus thing. Some will have it at the bachelor's level. It depends on the structure. In Finland, we do not, at the universities, we do not have any bachelor's degrees in English. But that is more about our degree structure than anything. Because as a student, when you come into Finland, you are given the study right to the bachelor and the master's degree. And so the master's degree is viewed as the end degree. That's the labor market degree, if you will. So the international programs in Finland are at the master's level. Whereas you go over to like Denmark, there are bachelor's degree programs. We have some in Finland, but they're at the University of Applied Sciences, which is more like the polytechnics. Yeah. So. And then I would also encourage you to think about your intentionality in your job search. Is this going to be a short term, or is this going to be a long term? The short term, there's a lot more probably opportunities available. People come for 18 months, 24 months, things like this. So those positions and funding are available, probably at a greater extent rather than the permanent positions. On CVs, they are a different format. So understand that. And you will need to spend time translating and reformatting your CV into that format. In Europe, there is the general format, it's the Europass. But each country takes on a different way of making it their own, if you will. But when I put my CV into the European format, the Europass format, it probably took me a good 3 or 4 hours. And even then, I spent the next couple of days reworking it and tweaking it, so it's not an easy process. In Europe, they include a lot of personal information. This is your norm. You have the photo of yourself, you have your date of birth, you have whether you're married, children, things like this. That's very typical. Things we would not do here in the US. In general, they are much more shorter and they're more skill focused. So what skills do you have? If you're looking for a faculty post, what funding have you had? Publications, things like this. They don't necessarily want a grand CV. It's very condensed. When I went up for my grant application, my CV was max 2 pages. And so, I'm like, okay, if I have my CV now in an American format,